She gave her life to saving others, years of study, sacrifice, and service. But in one cold meeting, it was all taken away with a single sentence. "You no longer work here." No reason, no warning, just silence and stares that said everything her colleagues wouldn't. For Isabella, it wasn't just a job she lost. It was her voice, her dignity, her place in a world that never fully accepted her. But fate has a cruel sense of irony, because the same man who took everything from her would soon come begging for the one thing only she could give. What happens when justice walks back through the same door that slammed it out? It was another long day at the hospital. Dr. Isabella moved through the corridors with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned her place through years of sacrifice. At 35, she had seen it all: late-night emergencies, sleepless shifts, lives saved, and lives lost. To her patients, she was more than a doctor. She was a calm in the storm. To her colleagues, she was brilliant, disciplined, and unshakably kind. But behind her steady smile was a truth she rarely spoke about: the weight of having to prove, over and over again, that she belonged. In the hospital's gleaming halls, subtle looks and whispered remarks had become part of her daily routine. Some dismissed her achievements as luck. Others questioned her authority, even when her record outshined their own. She had learned to navigate it all with quiet grace. Medicine was her passion, her purpose, and no amount of prejudice could take that from her. That morning, the hospital buzzed as usual. Nurses in motion, pagers beeping, the scent of coffee and antiseptic blending in the air. Isabella reviewed charts, comforted a patient, and smiled when a child handed her a hand-drawn thank you card. To anyone watching, she looked unstoppable. But beneath the surface, a shift was coming. Because in a world where skill should have been enough, perception was still her greatest opponent, and she had no idea that before the day ended, one man's decision, fueled by bias, not truth, would strip her of everything she had worked for. The hospital that had once been her second home was about to become the stage of her greatest test, and what began as an ordinary shift would soon reveal the ugly truth about power, privilege, and who gets to decide who belongs. The day had started like any other. Patients coming in, monitors beeping, and Isabella balancing a dozen tasks at once. But by noon, the air in the hospital felt heavier. Something was off. A senior surgeon, Dr. Porter, had been watching her all morning with that same look she'd seen before. Skeptical, dismissive, the kind of gaze that stripped years of experience down to a single judgment. When a trauma case came in, a car accident victim with multiple fractures, Isabella moved fast, her instincts sharp. She directed nurses, stabilized the patient, and within minutes had things under control. But when Porter entered the room, his tone sliced through the air. "Who authorized this procedure?" he demanded. "I did," Isabella replied calmly, her gloved hands steady. He frowned. "You, without consulting me first?" The words weren't about protocol. Everyone knew that in an emergency, saving the patient came first. What Porter really questioned wasn't her judgment. It was her authority. The patient lived. The team knew she'd handled it flawlessly. But Porter didn't congratulate her. Instead, he filed a procedural violation report, one that would reach administration before the day ended. By the next morning, whispers followed her through the halls. She caught the looks, the quick glances, the uneasy silence when she entered a room. Someone had said she overstepped. Someone had said she was too emotional, too reckless. She had heard it all before. Those words didn't just describe her, they undermined her. Then came the meeting, a conference room, 4 administrators, and Porter sitting across from her with a smug calm. The HR director read from a paper filled with formal phrases: unprofessional conduct, failure to follow protocol, decision-making concerns. Isabella sat quietly, her heart pounding. They didn't want her explanation. They wanted her compliance. When she tried to speak, Porter interrupted. "It's not personal, Dr. Ellis. We just have to maintain standards." Standards. The word echoed in her head. She had worked twice as hard for half the recognition. Yet here she was, being told she didn't meet the standard. By the time the meeting ended, her position was under review. She was suspended pending investigation. Just like that, years of dedication vanished behind a thin veil of procedure. She walked out of the room numb. The hospital corridors felt colder than ever. Colleagues avoided her gaze. Even the nurses who admired her looked away, afraid to be associated. Outside, the city moved as if nothing had happened. Cars passed, people hurried home. But for Isabella, time had slowed. The injustice clung to her like a shadow. She wasn't just fighting for her career anymore. She was fighting for her dignity. At home that night, she sat in silence. The phone buzzed, messages from coworkers, some sympathetic, most silent. But then, one message stood out. It was from the hospital board, a brief, formal notice. Meeting scheduled with hospital administration tomorrow morning. Isabella exhaled, steadying herself. Something told her this wasn't over. The next day, when she walked back into that building, she wasn't the same woman who had left. The hospital might have tried to silence her, but they had forgotten one thing. Truth has a way of speaking louder than power. And before the week was over, everyone in that building would hear it. The meeting room felt suffocating. The blinds were half drawn, sunlight slicing across the long wooden table where Isabella sat, alone on one side, facing a panel of executives on the other. The air smelled of coffee and cold authority. At the center sat Dr. Porter, the same smug calm etched across his face. The HR director cleared her throat and began reading again. The same rehearsed lines about professional, expectations, and ethical standards. Every word felt like a performance, a carefully staged justification for what everyone already knew wasn't fair. But then came the final blow. "Dr. Ellis," the hospital director said flatly, "after review, your contract will be terminated effective immediately." The words hit her like a physical strike. For a second, she couldn't breathe. Years of service, dedication, and sacrifice erased in a single sentence. She looked at their faces, searching for one trace of decency. There was none. Porter sat with his arms crossed, eyes gleaming with victory. She rose slowly, her chair scraping the floor. A sound that cut through the silence. "You're firing me for doing my job," she said softly. "For saving a patient." Porter's smirk deepened. "You broke procedure," he replied. She stared at him. "No, I broke your comfort zone." The room went still. No one moved. No one spoke. Isabella picked up her badge, the one she had worn with pride for over a decade. The metal glinted under the sterile light. For a moment, she just looked at it, then set it gently on the table. "You can take my job," she said, her voice steady now. "But you can't take the truth out of this place." And as she turned to leave, the door burst open. A nurse rushed in, breathless. "The patient from yesterday, the one Dr. Ellis treated, he's asking for her. Says she saved his life." The room froze. The timing couldn't have been sharper, truth arriving exactly when lies thought they'd won. Porter's smirk vanished, replaced by the realization that his story was falling apart. Isabella stood by the doorway, her face calm but unyielding. She didn't need to say another word. The silence spoke for her. And in that moment, everyone in that room understood. She had already won. When Isabella walked out of that building, the air outside felt different. Cleaner, sharper, real. The world hadn't changed, not yet, but she had. For the first time in months, she wasn't carrying the weight of pretending everything was okay. The badge they took away wasn't her worth. The title they stripped wasn't her power. What she still carried, what they could never touch, was her truth. Days later, the story broke. The hospital tried to stay silent, but the truth always has a way of echoing louder than lies. A patient's family came forward, their gratitude spilling across news outlets and social media. "She saved him when no one else would," the patient said in one interview. She saw a human being, not a number, not a statistic. And suddenly, the hospital's silence turned into panic. Statements were released. Internal reviews announced, apologies crafted. But none of it could erase what people now knew. Isabella didn't go back. Not because she couldn't, but because she wouldn't. She chose instead to open a small community clinic, the kind of place where compassion came before protocol, and where every patient, regardless of color or background, was treated with dignity. But even as she moved forward, she couldn't forget the truth of what happened in that room. It wasn't just about her firing. It was about every quiet act of discrimination that never made headlines. Every qualified black professional told they were too assertive. Every voice silenced in the name of comfort. And so, her story became more than her own. It became a mirror, reflecting a system that rewards arrogance and punishes integrity. The question that remains isn't whether Isabella proved them wrong. She did. The question is, how many more will have to lose everything just to remind the world that doing what's right should never come with a price? Don't miss more powerful real-life stories. Hit subscribe now.